This has to be some sort of cosmic joke, Commander Velix Thorn muttered, his crystalline antennae twitching with barely contained irritation. The transport shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, buffeting against what these humans called light turbulence. Light! His secondary stomach was already protesting. Looking around the cabin at his fellow Galactic Coalition officers, he could see similar expressions of disbelief and discomfort. They were all senior instructors from the most prestigious military academies across known space. And here they were, being sent to learn from cadets. Human cadets, no less. Approaching Kodiak Training Ground, Alaska, announced the shuttle's AI. Current temperature, -40°C, weather advisory in effect. Officer Zena Brightcrest, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with anxiety, leaned toward Thorn. Commander, I reviewed the briefing again. These human instructors? They're barely out of their growth cycle. The eldest is only 22 Earth years old. Precisely my point. Thorn adjusted his thermal regulator suit for the third time. The Coalition High Command has lost their collective minds. We're here to evaluate if humans are ready for full integration into advanced combat training. Instead, they're making us play survival games with their younglings. The shuttle touched down with a crunch of snow. Through the viewport, Thorn could see a group of humans waiting on the landing pad, wearing what appeared to be laughably primitive insulation garments. No protective fields, no thermal regulators, just layers of processed plant and animal fibers. Lieutenant Crick Starweaver, normally the most composed of their group, was practically vibrating his head frills. Those can't be our instructors. They're smiling. In this temperature, without proper equipment. The cabin door opened, letting in a blast of Arctic air that made everyone's environmental suits ping warning signals. A young human female stepped forward, her dark hair whipping in the wind, frost already forming on her eyebrows. Welcome to Alaska. I'm Cadet Captain Maya Rodriguez, and this is going to be the most enlightening 3 weeks of your lives. She grinned, showing far too many teeth. That's assuming you survive, of course. Thorn's antennae went rigid. Was that humor? In these conditions? Now, I know what you're thinking, Maya continued, gesturing to another human who was casually eating something called a protein bar with bare hands in the freezing cold. How are these primitive Deathworlders qualified to teach the galaxy's finest? Well, that's exactly what we're here to show you. Blake, would you like to explain today's first lesson? The protein bar-eating human, Blake, just pointed up at the darkening sky. Storm's coming, big one. Your shuttle just got grounded by command due to safety protocols. Hope you all packed your sleeping bags because your fancy environmental suits are about to run out of power in... He checked a primitive mechanical timepiece on his wrist. About 6 hours. So, who wants to learn how to build a snow shelter? Thorn looked at his fellow officers, their faces showing various stages of horror through their transparent face shields. He'd led 100 soldier operations, written tactical manuals used across 3 sectors, and survived 2 space battles. But somehow, watching these human cadets casually defy death with those unnerving smiles, he had a sinking feeling that his prestigious career was about to get very, very humbling. Maya clapped her hands together, the sound sharp in the frigid air. Lesson 1, officers. Survival isn't about having the best technology. It's about adapting when you have nothing at all. Now, who's ready to get uncomfortable? The next few hours were a blur of confusion, embarrassment, and steadily increasing panic for Commander Velix Thorn and his fellow officers. Maya had split them into teams, each paired with a human cadet who seemed far too cheerful about the whole situation. No, Commander, you can't use your plasma torch to melt the snow, Blake Turner said, casually snatching the device from Thorn's trembling hands. That's lesson 2. Electronics fail. Batteries die. Then what? Thorn wanted to point out that Centaurian technology never failed, but his environmental suit chose that exact moment to flicker and power down. The bitter cold hit him like a physical blow. Perfect timing, Maya called out, her breath forming clouds in the air. Now you'll really learn something. Nearby, Officer Zena Brightcrest was attempting to construct what the humans called a quinsy, a primitive snow shelter. Her bioluminescence had shifted to a distressed purple as she tried to pile snow with rapidly numbing hands. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Crick's Starweaver shouted over the rising wind. "The temperature is well below survivable limits. We need to call for emergency extraction." A new human cadet, Rex Morrison, nicknamed Wildcard by his peers, just laughed. "Survivable limits, those are just suggestions. Watch and learn, spaceman." The storm hit faster than anyone expected. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the wind howled like a wounded Kraxan beast. The human cadets immediately sprang into action, moving with practiced efficiency. "Everyone pair up," Maya's voice cut through the chaos. "Your suits are dead weight now. Strip them off and start moving. Hypothermia's knocking, and we don't want to answer." Thorn watched in disbelief as his fellow officers shed their useless technological protection. His own fingers had gone numb, and his antennae were picking up dangerous temperature warnings. "But our biological requirements—" he started to protest. Blake cut him off. "Your biology is more adaptable than you think. The real killer isn't the cold. It's your mind telling you can't survive this. Now move." The next 3 hours were a crash course in human survival techniques. They learned to pack snow, create wind barriers, and maintain core body temperature through constant movement. The humans taught them to check for frostbite, a concept that horrified the alien officers. "You mean your extremities can actually freeze and die while you're still alive?" Zena asked, her light patterns shifting to a nauseated green. "Sure can," Rex replied with disturbing enthusiasm. "That's why we're teaching you these tricks. Speaking of which, anyone want to learn how to eat snow safely?" The situation went from bad to worse when one of the snow shelters collapsed, nearly burying 2 officers. Traditional coalition rescue protocols proved useless without their technology. Thorn watched in amazement as Maya and her team orchestrated a rescue using nothing but their hands and crude tools made from broken branches. "That's not physically possible," Crix muttered, watching the humans dig through packed snow with bare hands. Their muscles should have seized up by now. "We're full of surprises," Maya grinned, her face covered in frost and sweat. "When your homeworld tries to kill you daily, you either adapt or die. Now, who wants to learn how to make a fire without matches?" As the night wore on, something remarkable happened. The alien officers began to adapt. Their bodies, pushed beyond what they thought possible, started responding to the primitive survival methods. Thorn found himself automatically checking his team's extremities for color changes, just as Maya had taught them. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Blake said, helping Thorn secure a makeshift snow wall. "You're all so focused on advancing beyond your biological limitations that you forgot how incredible those limitations actually are." A particularly strong gust of wind knocked Thorn off his feet. Without thinking, he rolled with the fall, using a technique Rex had demonstrated earlier. Getting up, he realized he was starting to think like them, like a human. "Ready for the real challenge?" Maya asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "This was just the warm-up. Tomorrow, we teach you how to hunt." The collective groan from the alien officers was drowned out by the howling wind and the inexplicable laughter of their human instructors. Thorn had a feeling this was going to be the longest 3 weeks of his distinguished career. Dawn broke over the Alaskan wilderness, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Commander Felix Thorn stood at the entrance of their makeshift camp, watching Maya Rodriguez demonstrate what she called the art of improvisation, which apparently meant turning their broken environmental suits into crude snowshoes. "You want us to wear our 100,000 credit equipment as footwear?" Lieutenant Crix asked, his head frills twitching in disbelief. "Would you rather sink up to your waist in snow every 3 steps?" Blake Turner responded, efficiently stripping useful components from his own suit. "Technology is just a tool. Sometimes a very expensive snowshoe is exactly what you need." The morning's lesson involved foraging for edible vegetation beneath the snow. Rex Wildcard Morrison had turned it into a competition, much to the humans' amusement and the aliens' confusion. "Found another one!" Rex shouted, proudly holding up what looked like a frozen twig. "That's 5 points for Team Wildcard." "That's tree bark," Zena Brightcrest pointed out, her bioluminescence pulsing with confusion. "Exactly, rich in calories and completely edible. Watch and learn." Rex promptly took a bite, causing several officers to flinch. "What? Never had a pine-flavoured breakfast before?" Thorne was about to comment on the absurdity of eating plant matter when a distant rumble caught his attention. Maya's expression shifted instantly from playful to serious. "Everyone, freeze!" she commanded, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen to the mountain." The rumbling grew louder. Blake's eyes widened. "Avalanche! West slope! Move, move, move!" What happened next would forever change Thorne's understanding of human capabilities. Without any technology, without any advanced warning systems, the human cadets orchestrated an escape plan in seconds. "Trees! Aim for the largest ones!" Maya shouted, already helping Officer Zena through the deep snow. "Thorne, grab that rope. Crix, behind that boulder. Move like your life depends on it, because it does." The wall of snow came crashing down the mountainside with devastating force. Thorne found himself running on pure instinct, his makeshift snowshoes actually working as intended. Years of tactical training told him to analyze, to calculate, to plan, but the humans' voices cut through his thoughts. "Stop thinking and start moving!" Blake yelled, practically carrying 2 junior officers towards safety. "Your brain's trying to solve a problem that your body already knows how to handle." The avalanche caught the edge of their group. Thorne watched in horror as Rex disappeared under a wave of snow, only to emerge seconds later, riding a piece of environmental suit plating like some sort of primitive sliding device. "Woo-hoo! 10 points for style!" Rex cheered, somehow managing to grab another officer and pull them to safety in the process. When the snow settled, they found themselves scattered but alive. Maya immediately started checking everyone for injuries, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd done this far too many times. "This is impossible," Crix muttered, brushing snow from his frills. "We survived a Class 3 gravitational displacement event without a single piece of safety equipment." "We survived because we worked together," Maya corrected him. "Humans don't conquer nature, we adapt to it. Sometimes that means riding an avalanche on a piece of scrap metal." Thorne found himself laughing, the sound surprising even him. "You planned this, didn't you? The whole thing was a setup." Blake grinned. "The avalanche? No, that was Mother Nature's contribution to today's lesson. But we knew something would go wrong. Something always does. That's why we've been teaching you to stop relying on technology and start trusting your instincts." "Speaking of instincts," Rex called out, still cheerful despite being covered in snow. "Who's hungry for more tree bark?" The collective groan from the alien officers was interrupted by a series of beeps. Their environmental suits, buried under feet of snow, finally running out of power completely. "Perfect timing," Maya smiled. "Now who wants to learn how to build a signal fire using nothing but wet wood and sheer determination? Fair warning, it involves a technique we call positive thinking, and possibly some colourful human vocabulary." Thorne looked at his fellow officers, seeing the same realization in their eyes. They were starting to understand why humans had survived on their death world for so long. It wasn't about having the right technology or following proper procedures. It was about adapting, improvising, and somehow finding a way to laugh in the face of certain doom. "Teach us," he said, and meant it this time. The universe, Commander Velix Thorne decided, had a twisted sense of humor. Just when they were starting to get comfortable with primitive survival techniques, a massive solar flare knocked out every piece of working technology in a 1,000-mile radius. "Well, this is awkward," Maya Rodriguez announced, staring at the aurora-filled sky that normally would have been beautiful if it wasn't spelling their doom. "Command just lost all contact with us. Emergency channels are down, backup systems are fried. Anyone know any good ghost stories? Ghost stories. Lieutenant Crix's head frills stood straight up in alarm. We're facing a complete technological blackout in sub-zero temperatures, and you want to tell stories about deceased spirits? Blake Turner was already gathering branches for a fire, completely unfazed. Better than telling stories about how we all froze to death, right? Besides, this is perfect timing for today's lesson. What lesson? Zena Brightcrest asked, her bioluminescence flickering nervously in the growing darkness. How to die slowly in a blizzard. Nope. Rex Morrison appeared, dragging what looked like a fallen tree branch. Today's lesson is about why humans are the galaxy's greatest paranoid preppers. Maya, show them the cache. Maya's grin was visible even in the dimming light. She led them to what appeared to be a simple snowbank and started digging. To everyone's surprise, she uncovered a hidden compartment containing primitive tools, dried food, and what looked like animal furs. You planned for this specific scenario? Thorne asked, his antennae twitching in disbelief. Not exactly, Blake admitted, already distributing the supplies. We plan for everything. It's kind of our thing. When your species spends most of its history trying not to die, you learn to stash supplies everywhere, like everywhere. The blizzard hit, just as they finished retrieving the emergency supplies. The wind howled through the trees, carrying ice particles that stung exposed skin. The temperature dropped another 20 degrees, and the alien officers watched in horror as their breath froze in mid-air. "Okay, pop quiz," Maya shouted over the wind. "Who remembers how to build a snow shelter, because we're going to need about 6 of them in the next hour?" What followed was a crash course in extreme survival that would have made any survival instructor proud, or possibly faint. The human cadets turned their dire situation into what they called a hands-on learning experience. See, this is why we made you practice without tech. Rex demonstrated how to create an emergency shelter using nothing but snow and broken branches. No fancy force fields, no energy barriers, just good old-fashioned physics and stubbornness. Thorne found himself working alongside Blake, packing snow into blocks. "I don't understand. You're teaching us techniques that went obsolete centuries ago. Why?" Blake paused, his face serious for once. "Because technology fails. Nature doesn't care about your advancement level. The universe will always find new ways to try to kill you. But you know what never goes obsolete? The will to survive." The situation grew worse as the night progressed. The temperature continued to drop, and the wind threatened to tear apart their shelters. But something remarkable was happening. The alien officers, trained in the most advanced military techniques in the galaxy, were starting to think like humans. Zena figured out how to use her natural bioluminescence to signal between shelters. Crix discovered his head frills could detect subtle changes in wind patterns, giving them precious minutes of warning before each major gust. Even Thorne found himself automatically checking the snow consistency for avalanche risks, just as Maya had taught them. "Look at you all," Maya beamed with pride, her face illuminated by their makeshift fire. "Using your natural abilities instead of relying on tech. That's the secret, you know. Humans didn't survive Earth by being the strongest or the fastest. We survived by using everything we had and then making tools out of everything we didn't." "But it's more than that," Rex added, surprisingly thoughtful as he showed them how to melt snow for drinking water. "We survived because we never accepted death as inevitable. Well, except for taxes. Those are definitely inevitable." "Did you just make a joke about tax law in the middle of a survival crisis?" Crix asked, incredulous. "Sure did. Lesson 23. Humor keeps you warm. Or maybe that's the friction from groaning at bad jokes. Either way, it works." As the night wore on, they took turns keeping watch and maintaining the fires. The human cadets taught them songs, horrible, wonderful songs about everything from ancient warriors to something called a rubber duck. They shared stories of survival against impossible odds, each tale more unbelievable than the last. "So there I was," Rex was saying, gesturing wildly, "trapped in the Rockies with nothing but a paperclip and an optimistic attitude." He's exaggerating, Blake whispered to Thorne. It was 2 paperclips. Commander Thorne realized something profound as he watched his officers laugh at the humans' stories. They weren't just learning survival techniques. They were learning the most fundamental human trait of all, the ability to face certain death with a smile and a bad joke. "Incoming!" Maya's shout cut through the night. Another wave of the storm approached, this one worse than before. But instead of panic, Thorne felt something new: confidence. "Officer Zenner, signal the other shelters. Crix, wind reading. Everyone else, reinforce the barriers." The orders came naturally now, blending coalition training with their new primitive skills. Maya watched with obvious pride as the alien officers moved with practiced efficiency, no longer hesitating or questioning the primitive methods. "Now that," she said to Blake, "is what I call adaptation. Think we should tell them the solar flare was scheduled maintenance?" "Nah," Blake grinned. "Let them have this one. Besides, Command actually did lose contact. Something about the backup systems getting chewed up by a moose." "A moose?" Thorne's antennae perked up. "What's a moose?" Rex's eyes lit up with unholy glee. "Oh boy, wait until you hear about tomorrow's lesson on local wildlife." The breaking point came on day 5. After surviving the solar flare, blizzard, and a terrifying encounter with what Rex gleefully called just a baby moose, 3 of the alien officers had reached their limit. "This is insanity." Officer Zenner's bioluminescence had faded to a dull grey of exhaustion. "We're senior coalition instructors, not primitive survival enthusiasts. I haven't felt my secondary appendages in 2 days." Lieutenant Crix backed her up, his head frills drooping. "The coalition will hear about this. We came to evaluate humans for advanced combat integration, not to play caveman in the snow." Commander Thorne watched as Maya Rodriguez simply stood there, letting them vent. She wasn't smiling anymore, but there was something in her eyes, a look he'd started to recognize as the calm before a very human storm. "You're right," Maya said quietly, silencing everyone. "This is insanity. Just like it's insane that humans evolved on a planet that actively tries to kill us. Just like it's insane that we survived ice ages with nothing but pointy sticks and determination. Just like it's insane that your fancy coalition technology just got beaten by a moose with an appetite for power cables." Blake stepped forward, his usual humor replaced by intensity. "You want to quit? Fine. But first, tell me what happens when your ship's life support fails in deep space. When your emergency beacon dies. When you're stranded on a hostile planet and all you have is your own 2 hands and the will to live." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind. Rex Wildcard Morrison, for once, wasn't cracking jokes. He was methodically preparing what they'd learned to call a bug-out bag, a primitive survival kit that had saved their lives twice already. "Look at your hands," Maya commanded. The alien officers complied, confused. "Those hands built shelters this week, found food, created fire from nothing, protected your teammates. No technology, no advanced tools, just flesh and bone and determination." Commander Thorne felt something shift in his understanding. "We've been looking at this all wrong," he said, his antennae quivering with sudden realization. "The Coalition sent us to evaluate humans for advanced training, but we should have been evaluating ourselves." Maya's smile returned, fierce and proud. "Now you're getting it. Humans didn't survive Earth because we're stronger or smarter. We survived because we never accepted our limitations. Every time nature said, 'You can't survive this,' we said, 'Watch us,' and then taught our children how we did it." "But there's more," Blake added. "Show them, Rex." Rex pulled out a crude map he'd drawn in the snow. "While you were all considering quitting, I was tracking our position. We're actually in the middle of what humans call a killing zone, where 3 different weather systems meet. The temperature dropped another 15 degrees last night. By all your coalition survival metrics, we should be dead." "But we're not," Thorne whispered, understanding dawning, "because we stopped relying on metrics and started adapting." "Bingo!" Maya clapped him on the shoulder. "Humans don't just survive. We turn survival into a science, then an art, then a game. Every limitation becomes a challenge. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to overcome. The transformation in the group was remarkable. Zena's bioluminescence brightened with newfound determination. Crix's frills lifted, sensing a change in more than just the wind. "So," Maya grinned, that familiar mischievous glint returning to her eyes, "who's ready for today's real lesson? Because that moose from yesterday, it has friends, and they're blocking our only route back to base." "You mean this whole crisis of confidence was?" Thorne started. "Just another teaching moment," Blake finished. "Welcome to human instructional methods. We find people learn best when they're having an existential crisis while facing imminent death by megafauna." Commander Thorne looked at his fellow officers, seeing not the broken, complaining group from minutes ago, but survivors who'd discovered something profound about themselves. They weren't just learning to survive without technology, they were learning to thrive on challenges that would have once seemed impossible. "Well then," Thorne said, surprising himself with a very human grin, "I believe you mentioned something about moose diplomacy?" Rex shouldered his bug-out bag with a wicked smile. "Oh, this is going to be fun. Who wants to learn about the strategic application of snowballs?" "Welcome to your final exam," Maya Rodriguez announced, standing before the group with what the alien officers had learned to recognize as her "this is going to be fun, but you might hate me" expression. 1 week, no backup, no emergency supplies except what you can carry in these lovely primitive backpacks. Commander Velix Thorne eyed the worn canvas pack suspiciously. After 2 weeks of training, he knew better than to ask why they couldn't use standard coalition equipment. "Plot twist," Rex chimed in, bouncing with his usual enthusiasm. "Blake, Maya, and I won't be joining you. You're on your own, space cowboys." Lieutenant Crix actually laughed. 2 weeks ago he would have filed a formal protest. Now his head frills waved with excitement. "Let me guess. You'll be watching from a safe distance, ready to rescue us if things go wrong?" "Nope," Blake grinned. "We'll be enjoying hot chocolate at base camp. Consider this a trust fall exercise, except the trust is in yourselves, and the fall might involve bears." Bears? Zena's bioluminescence pulsed with what was now more anticipation than fear. "The large predators you mentioned that can smell fear. And food, and overconfidence, and—" Rex started listing before Maya cut him off. "You have everything you need," she said seriously, "both in your packs and, more importantly, up here." She tapped her head. "Trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember, humans figured this out with significantly less evolved brains than yours." What followed was the most enlightening week of Commander Thorne's long career. His team didn't just survive, they thrived. They built shelters that would have made their instructors proud, found food using techniques that blended their natural abilities with human ingenuity, and even started making jokes about their predicament. The true test came on day 5, when they encountered what Thorne would later learn was a grizzly bear. The massive predator emerged from the tree line just as they were preparing their evening meal. "Formation Omega," Crix suggested, his military training kicking in. "No," Thorne said calmly, remembering Maya's lessons. "Remember what they taught us about apex predators. Zena, brightness to maximum. Crix, make those frills as big as you can. Everyone else, grab your noisemakers." What followed would have looked absurd to any observer. 6 highly trained coalition officers jumping, shouting, and making themselves appear as large and loud as possible. The bear, apparently deciding that these strange creatures weren't worth the trouble, turned and lumbered away. "Did we just—" Zena's lights pulsed with joy. "Did we just out-predator a predator?" "Using nothing but noise and show," Thorne confirmed proudly. "No weapons, no force fields, no technology. Just pure human survival tactics." That night, as they sat around their perfectly constructed campfire, eating foraged food, prepared using techniques that would have horrified their previous selves, Commander Thorne realized something profound. They hadn't just learned to survive like humans, they'd learned to think like them, to see challenges as opportunities, to treat survival as an art form, and most importantly, to laugh in the face of danger. When Maya, Blake and Rex found them a week later, they discovered their alien students teaching each other new survival techniques they'd invented themselves.